I wasn't surprised by what Councillor Oates said about the Arts Development Officer initiative. I think it's wholly consistent with what the County Council have just been doing across the county, and which has affected Fylde enormously in terms of libraries. And obviously the museum service is being cut, and that will affect us all. Our lives will be so much poorer because of these cuts in what I would call the arts service. Fylde at least is making a contribution towards developing that, and I am surprised that Councillor Oates does not support something which is progressive and not retrograde. As a county councillor, she obviously voted for the cuts a few days ago. I would also applaud the fact that the bus shelter programme, which will affect all parts of Fylde, not just Lytham St Anne's, and will help provide better transport in those areas which still enjoy bus services. It's been a particularly difficult area because the mess of who provides bus shelters has been difficult to work out. But an ongoing programme will benefit all people, youngsters and the elderly, in Fylde as this programme is continued. I am happy, more than happy, to support this budget. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak on this substantive motion? I'd like to invite Councillor Oates in to put their amendment.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that other means of funding the proposed arts officer post be sought, and that the £31,000 shown in the revenue budget for this purpose be removed. External funding has been used by the council in the past as a way of putting posts in place which are not essential but desirable. And I give, for example, the cycling officer and the dunes officer. And I think that that's what we should be looking at in relation to this post during these very difficult times in relation to public service financing. As I've already pointed out, the council is experiencing uncertain times in relation to funding, and we may soon be looking at cutting all but statutory services and looking at very different ways to carry out business in the future. So I don't believe that this is a sensible time to establish a permanent post, which it may soon be impossible to fund and may not be sustainable. Finding another way of funding this post is surely the best method, in that it will not raise expectations in the post holder, and if we're short of funds, it will be easier to remove. Excuse me. I'd also suggest that the working group meet again to look at other areas of funding the arts generally. I believe that it may now be possible for councils to sell artwork as long as the proceeds are used for art-related purposes. We own a painting which is worth several millions of pounds, which has been touring the world for several years, so has not been available to Fylde residents for them to view, even if we had somewhere to display it. Could we therefore not look at selling the piece? If we were successful, we would have finance available to us to upgrade all the other pieces of art in our possession. We could also provide a gallery within the town halls as part of the accommodation project, in which to display the art and make it available to the public. Surely we owe it to the public and the families of the donors of the artwork to finally have a gallery in our borough in which to display our artwork. I really have to finish by picking up on what Councillor Pittman said. She talks about cuts in the county council. Those cuts are necessary because of the government cuts, the Conservative cuts. They are absolutely savage and they are unfair to Lancashire. And it's only a pity that Conservative councillors and MPs did not get onto the government to ask them to increase the funding to Lancashire. If they had done so, as the Southern MPs did, then perhaps we'd have seen some of the money returned to us. We are being starved by a government, and I think it's because it's a non-Conservative council at Lancashire.
I'm happy to second that amendment and would like to reserve the right to speak.
Anyone like to speak on the amendment? Councillor Little.
Thank you very much. I'd like to point out that this Arts Development Officer is part of it is to secure external funding and will look at external funding for all of the artists, not just the St Anne's or the art collection. It's for St Anne's and Firewood. So it's going to be worldwide. It can be on anything from opening buildings and art. The scope is huge. So that external funding is there. So I'm happy to support this.
Anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Silver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm surprised that Councillor Little is so confident that there's external funding out there for the arts. Certainly the work I'm involved in, it shows that that money isn't available. We're not looking at, there is no guarantee with this post of 31,000 that this officer, this employee would be able to secure the funding. What concerns me tonight is a few councillors have kept saying that there isn't an urban-rural divide, but I'm afraid that is absolutely obvious when you look at these papers. And it would be great if buildings could be opened and things, as Councillor Little has just said, but we haven't got those buildings in rural Fylde. We have lost those buildings. We certainly haven't anything to protect that an officer being paid 31,000 for trying to bring in extra funding would be fair across the whole of the borough. With regard to libraries and museums, a post at Fylde would not and will not protect our libraries and museums in this county. At present we have, I think it's 74 libraries with potential losses bringing them down to 32. As Councillor Oates has said, this is due to the government with these massive, vicious cuts that our services, our community services that are crucial to us are under threat. And quite frankly, we need those more in the rural areas because we just haven't got anything. It's as simple as that. I do believe that in the past when we've had officers, as mentioned earlier by Councillor Oates, for the cycling officer in the dunes, they were self-funding positions. There is no, I repeat again, there is absolutely no guarantee that this £31,000 post can pull in monies from funding. There is no guarantee. Meanwhile, we're losing officers in different areas in our council. All these savings that have been talked about earlier. And I'm sorry, I cannot support £31,000 spent on such a role.
Thank you. Councillor Ashley.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. You know, if the opposition were in control of this council, we'd be facing a much larger council tax for the people of our borough. And quite clearly, that's not the right thing to do. It's so easy to spend other people's money, isn't it? And that's what Councillor Oates and her colleagues would have us do, by not freezing council tax and accepting the government's council tax freeze grants in previous years, which I think was the right thing to do. Councillor Oates says she's not been involved in budget discussions and won't be in the future. The council sets the council tax. The council sets the budget. The people have filed electors to do that. The opposition are quite within their right to propose an alternative budget, and all 51 members can vote upon it, which is what we're doing tonight. Quite appropriate. Councillor Oates also mentioned the urban-rural split. This split's been going on from before I got this council, which is quite some time ago. In fact, it could be before Councillor Hayhurst's time on the council as well. It's a myth, colleagues. A myth. It does not exist. A few years ago, we did some analysis of spend across the borough, comparing the rural area with the urban area. What we found was actually more money spent per head of household, per capita in the rural areas than there was in the urban area. So quite clearly, it was a myth then, and it is a myth now. Let me go on to Councillor Oates and Lancashire County Council and the savage cuts that have had to be made. Let me tell you, members, that Councillor Oates, without fail, votes with the Labour group at County Hall. She is an independent socialist. That's what we've decided to name her, because her hand goes up every time Labour proposes something. Indeed, the Conservatives at the County Council proposed an amendment to the budget which would have kept the libraries and museums open for a further 12 months. Councillor Oates voted against that. She voted against keeping our libraries and museums open for a further 12 months. Now, for her to sit there and complain about the government and what we've done is just wholly irresponsible. She seems to forget that the finances of this country were in a total mess from when the last Labour government were in, and we've had to pick up the pieces as a Conservative government. Yes, we've had to make tough choices, but as Conservatives, we will make those tough choices, and we'll make sure this country's back on the straight and narrow again. And let me go on to the post of the Arts Development Officer. Sorry. Now, let me tell you, let me give you one figure, and that's £55,000. That's the amount of money that was given to the borough from the Arts Council England as grants to arts projects. Nearly 50,000 went to AFC Fylde, and just over 5,000 went to a local scheme in the borough. Now, from my recollection, AFC Fylde is in the rural area, and therefore it's received a lion's share of some national funding. But let me tell you something, Fylde does not receive its fair share of Arts Council funding, by no means. If you take London and the rest of the country, London receives more Arts Council funding per capita than the rest of the country. If you take the North West, Manchester and Liverpool receive more than Lancashire does per capita. And if you take Fylde, we receive less than a lot of boroughs in Lancashire. So we have to have the right person in post to help artists and campaigners and groups to make sure we access this funding. Don't forget the government has not cut Arts Council funding. It's still there, it can be applied for, and with this Arts Development Officer, we'll be able to access these funds. Now let me remind members that this post is actually put into two roles. One is to help people access the funds that I've just mentioned, but the other is to look after our collection, which is down in the cellar, in the basement of the Town Hall. And Councillor Oates is quite right. We owe it to the donors to make sure that people are going to see these works of art. And without such an officer, it's not going to happen. So it's all right saying something, but we're actually going to put our money where our mouth is and do something about it as Conservatives, and quite rightly. And yes, it may be appropriate to look at our paintings and works of art, and maybe sell one or two to actually improve the collection that we've got. And that's something we should be looking at. But without a correct officer in post, it's not going to happen. So, colleagues, I commend this budget to you. Our chairman of committees and our finance committee have done a splendid job, particularly the deputy leader. And I think we should dismiss this amendment. It's not worthy. A foul council supporting it, which is supports the substantive motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Before I bring in you, Councillor Small, I'm allowing Councillor
of personal explanation, Mr. Mayor.
Excuse me. Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Yes. I'm allowed
What's the
it.
point of order? Would you like to tell us the clause in the standing orders?
Well, it's just that Rule 3.5 of the procedural says the mover of an amendment has no right to reply.
I'm standing on a point of personal explanation, Councillor.
Yes, I'm allowed
I'm
it.
allowed
As
to do.
I've said, and it's been said, it's a personal explanation. Carry on, Councillor.
Councillor Ashton has made several personal comments, which I feel I have to speak on. He talked about me supporting the Labour budget at the County Council. Indeed, I did. I did so because since last May, there has been a
Chairman, this is
cross-party...
not a point of personal explanation.
It is. I am explaining why I supported the Labour budget and why I am not an independent senator. Mr. Mayor.
The Mayor has stood up. Please follow your own rules when the Mayor has stood up.
I'm allowed.
The Mayor has stood up. Allowing you to carry on.
Thank you. As I said, at the County Council, from May there has been a cross-party budget working group. All groups attended that meeting, even the Conservatives, but they didn't participate. They have had since last May to work with all the other groups to get a budget together, but they failed to do so. I repeat that we have had cuts. We've had several cuts, but quite frankly, Councillor Ashton and his colleagues could have fed into it. They didn't feed into that budget. All they did at the last budget meeting was come forward with a proposal to borrow £5.5 million. Now, you've done it, you don't like it throwing back at you. You don't like it throwing back at you.
Could everybody sit down, please,
Not
when the Mayor
acceptable.
stood up? The Mayor has the final say on the proceedings. Councillor Rhodes clearly isn't making what is technically a point of personal clarification. If the Mayor allows it, that is the Mayor's discretion. A point of personal clarification is where something that has been previously said is misinterpreted subsequently and then it's clarified. Now, the Mayor has the final say. At this moment in time, the Mayor is allowing Councillor Rhodes to speak. Every other councillor in this room needs to follow the orders of the Mayor, unfortunately. So, I will let the Mayor allow this to continue if he wishes, but other members cannot keep butting in and standing up.
Thank you. If you'd like to carry on.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am trying to clarify what Councillor Ashton said. He has said, I am an independent socialist. I am trying to explain why I voted for the Labour budget, which I did, and it doesn't make me an independent socialist. I would also like to point out that in December, I voted with the Conservatives to defeat the corporate plan at the County Council. I wasn't called an independent Conservative at that meeting. Nobody was so rude as to do so. I hope I've clarified what I did and why I did it. Councillor Ashton has actually attacked me, as he quite regularly does, and I have a right to come back and answer that. If he doesn't like me coming back and answering it, he shouldn't make the attacks in the first place.
Sorry, Councillor Small.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm slightly worried about standing up now, because I am going to talk about the file budget and the amendment. I do have to say that I was on this council before, and many years ago I made the mistake of actually going down the cellar to look at this much vaunted art collection. And I have to say I was terribly disappointed with what I saw, because unfortunately File doesn't have the proper facilities to actually look after that art collection. I hope it's in better condition now than it was, because it was, in some cases, pretty dire. Now, let's go back onto this arts officer. The 30,000 that have been talked about, I'm assuming that's salary plus on costs. The person isn't going to walk away with 30,000, quite considerably less. Well, let's have a look at this. Our arts collection has been rotting, it's been in decay. We've only just got round to cataloguing it a few months ago, after many, many years. And you've got to remember that this art collection, so-called art collection, was actually given by a variety of people in the past, usually in respect of kind of paying death duties and taxes. It wasn't one that we wanted necessarily, we were landed with it. I don't know, I'm something of a Philistine, I have to be honest with regard to artwork, so I don't know if we can sell artwork or not. Personally speaking, I'd be quite open-minded to it, and we've talked about the so-called painting that's worth a number of millions. Well, let's see what we could get to that. But that in itself would be controversial, because we would have to justify that to sizable numbers of members of our public. We've heard talk about an art gallery or art galleries. Well, that's pie in the sky. It really is pie in the sky. I think actually Booths at Lytham did a first-class job a few years ago when they opened a new store and put art on display. But I have to be honest, let's be honest here, this art collection isn't good enough to actually merit a display. Or once it's been seen once or twice, that's really it. They're not the kind of wide range of paintings that people might expect. So I think it is important to go along with this job and this arts development officer, because I think first of all we've got to really let's see what we've got. Let's see what we can sell, if we can sell it, and look at the pros and cons of that. Let's see what we can exhibit, if we can exhibit, where we can exhibit. But to do that, we actually need an officer to do the legwork. So let's stick with this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Deputy Mayor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to support the arts officer, but I am concerned about the £31,000 when we're all everywhere doing massive cuts. And it's interesting to listen to all this debating, because the area I represent, and I feel really out on the limb, Newton and Trails, we haven't even got a bus or a bus shelter, let alone a village hall. We have a porter cabin. So, you know, I find it quite distasteful when you talk about there isn't this rural-urban divide, because of everything I've heard tonight, we're not all inclusive in this budget. I love art. You talk about all these pieces of art that, you know, aren't worthy for everybody to look at. I've never seen them, and I want to be included in that. It's not all about Lytham St Anne's. And will this officer in the post, what will he or she do for the rural areas so that we are included? And it's not just all about Lytham and St Anne's. And I can see some of you Conservatives nodding, and you might agree with my sentiments. What I don't like is all this backbiting and nastiness. And I have to support Councillor Rose to stand up there. All right, she might go on a bit, but Councillor Ashton, you are very rude. You are very rude, and you make it personal. And I also don't like sniggering. I don't like it. And I'm up here watching you. Thank you.
Councillor Goodman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to just bring a little bit of calm to the proceeding. And I'd also like to endorse Councillor Roger Small. I remember. We all remember you, Roger. I would like to endorse what he said today. Councillor Speak, I totally agree with what you've said about the art officer, but I think that we ought to go with the art officer. I think that this would do an absolute huge service to Farnborough. St Anne's Town Council has had arts and music festivals over the last few years, and they've done really, really well. I say that because I did stand for the last 4 or 5 years for the parish council, and we actually brought in so many people to the area, not only to St Thomas and Witham, but also to the whole of the borough. We know that because of the number of tourists that come through and see this beautiful, beautiful area. I'm just going to finish off with a quote from Hard Times. Hard Times, which might be appropriate at the moment. And as Leary himself said, albeit not to do with any sort of circus, people must have entertainment. Thank you.
Councillor Notty, do you wish to reply?
I'm, yes, finding it hard to know where to start with this. First of all, I think I need some clarity about what this post actually is. I thought I'd read the report, and I thought that the Arts Development post was in fact what the Arts Development Officer was to look after the collection of art that we have. I'm listening to all sorts of different people that are saying it's going to affect the Homewood file, the rural file, etc., etc. But that is not what I actually read. Maybe I've missed it, I don't know. And to get funding, which maybe that's where it comes in. But I think we need some clarity about what we're actually talking about. With all the financial problems we're facing at present, I can't support a new post of an Arts Development Officer at the cost of £31,000 per annum. Although I like many others, value this collection of artworks, I have seen a lot of it has been improved, it is being well looked after, it is worthy of being looked at. Perhaps Mr. Small needs another tour around the town hall to have a look at things. But when I was mayor, I was fortunate, there was a group, an arts group that came in, they did a lot of the cataloguing, they looked at the pieces, they put them tidily, at least, in the mayor's parlour, and I know that there's a lot of good art there, and it certainly is worthy of displaying. However, and it should be more accessible to all, but I feel that we've got so many interested and knowledgeable people out there in our borough who do much of this work in a voluntary capacity. And I just feel that this post could be, the work of this post could be brought forward in another way. And I'd welcome any expansion into rural farming. Indeed, that's what it's aiming for. But this doesn't seem the right time, with all the financial difficulties we know we're facing, to be adding a new post to the revenue budget for a service which is not an essential service. It's not a statutory service, it's not essential. And I feel there must be ways of achieving this without this. St Thomas have been fortunate. They've benefited from the High Street Innovation Fund. They can raise more than any of us through their parish council preset, and they are doing some good things. But I do feel a lot of this is going on already. And I think this is proposed to be a post which is permanent, full-time, and is across the whole 4 years forecast at £30,000 or £31,000. That is a lot of money. And regardless of whether if it was proposed for 1 year, and the aim was to get grants in to fund it thereafter, then perhaps I would go with it. But the way it's put forward, I think it needs to go back to the committee, and other things need to be looked at, whether it's selling a painting, and it doesn't have to be the best painting, it could be some other things. I mean, we had a piece of ivory stolen that was worth a huge amount. So we have got things, other things that could perhaps be used to fund these things. I do think it needs further looking at. And because of that, if this amendment loses, I can't vote for the whole budget. I would like to vote for this post in it. Thank you.
Councillor Buckley, would you like to...
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. It's interesting that this has reignited a conversation again about our arts collection, and calls for us to reinstate the working group and have a further discussion about it. Should we sell the art? It's only a year ago when we had that working group in discussion meeting. That was under our old scrutiny committee system. When the scrutiny committee took a report and decided to set up a working group to look into how we manage our art collection. And out of that working group came several recommendations, which first of all came before Cabinet, if I recall, and then have culminated, and it is over a year of discussions, have culminated in this proposal for an arts development officer. So if members are asking us to rewind and have all those discussions again, it's quite a dramatic U-turn. It has been talked about for quite some time, and that is why it's before us in a budget proposal tonight. I think Fylde is proud of its art. Fylde wants to support its art. We've heard so much about the great things that go on that are to do with our art, and we have and celebrate a fantastic summer festival, don't we? Lytton Festival. I think there is a momentum in Fylde for us to support our arts further, and this will only do that to the good. So I do maintain support for this particular post and speak against the amendment. Thank you.
We'll now take the vote on the amendment.
Mr. Mayor, before we vote, if I clarify my understanding of Councillor Ode's amendment, Councillor Ode's, I assume, is moving the budget as set out in the recommendations, with the exception of funding for an arts officer, and that this funding is removed and alternative external sources be sought for that arts officer. Thank you, Councillor Oates. So the amendment is, I move other means of funding the proposed arts officer be sought, and that the 31,000 be shown in the revenue budget for this purpose be removed. And presumably that's in addition to moving the budget in general, that addendum to it. No.
Right, you've all heard the amendments. All those in favour, please show. Those against? Any abstentions? I'm sorry. The amendment is lost. We'll now go to the vote on the substantive motion. This will, as it's the budget, will be a recorded vote.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'll read names out alphabetically, and then you can indicate if you are for the substantive motion, against it, or abstain. Thank you. Councillor Aitken. For. Councillor Ackroyd. For. Councillor Anthony.
For.
Councillor Ashton.
For.
Councillor Barker. Councillor Beckett.
Yes.
Councillor Blackshaw. For. Councillor Brickles. Councillor Buckley. Councillor Chu. Councillor Clayton. Councillor Collins. Councillor Delma Collins. Councillor Peter Collins. Councillor Corner. Councillor Zacherley. Councillor Fiddler.
Councillor Ford. Councillor Goodman. Councillor Green. Councillor Harvey.
For.
Councillor Hayhurst.
For.
Councillor Henshaw.
Abstain.
Councillor Jakes. Councillor Little. Councillor Lloyd.
Abstain.
Councillor Barbara Nash. Councillor Edward Nash.
For.
Councillor Neil. Councillor Nunty. Councillor Oates.
Abstain.
Councillor Pittman. Councillor Pounder.
For.
Councillor Redcliffe.
For.
Councillor Rigby. Councillor Settle. Councillor Silverwood. Councillor Singleton.
For.
Councillor Small.
For.
Councillor Taylor.
For.
Councillor Thomas.
For.
Councillor Wilder. Councillor Speak. Councillor Harvey.
Abstain.
The substantive motion has been carried with 28 members voting for and 14 abstaining.